All right, as you just heard, my name's Trent Kusters. I'm the founder and director of what we call we're not really a studio because we don't actually have anywhere to go. So we're more of an indie development collective. So we're a collective of people from multiple industries that have come together to make this game, Armello, and you're going to hear about how we're making that possible. So a few years ago, I was the design director at one of Australia's oldest and most established studios, Taurus Games, which has the lesser well-known claim that they've developed more games than any other independent developer in the world. I think over 150 across all their SKUs, which is pretty crazy. But about 2 years ago, so I think it was around March in 2010, or no, 2011 maybe, I don't know. I left and I just left. GDC was coming up and I was like, what am I going to do here? Things had shifted, the industry was moving, and with the GFC closing in on the Australian games industry, although there was a need for me at Taurus, my role couldn't really be facilitated anymore. So I moved on. There were some things I was doing on the side. I was still helping Jazz out at the RGDA in Melbourne, helping with the ashes of the industry that we once had and trying to plant beautiful little buds in there. But I was also lecturing at Swinburne every few days, doing some lecturing on narrative design. And although Armello isn't a Games for Change, when I was at Swinburne, I actually worked on a project that had 250 students developing an MMO that would be placed in schools for Year 9 students, and there were 10 worlds, 10 planets that the students would travel to and create quests. The worlds were like perform the quests and solve the goals of the planet, but the creative directors of each planet were actually Aspies, or people with Asperger's. Very well-known, successful people around Australia that have Asperger's, and they actually designed the planets, designed the conflict, designed the story, the culture, everything. It's amazing. You can imagine someone with Asperger's designing a game. It was very, very thorough. And these students then had to work with their mentors, these creative directors, and make these planets come together. And I was a narrative design tutor and mentor on that project. It was called Aspergen for anyone who's interested. And then also during that time I was consulting to the film industry. I was consulting to a bunch of producers from Hong Kong, actually, Hong Kong cinema, that wanted to do a game. And I was the man to help them out with that, apparently. But this entire time I felt like I was slipping. I felt like this scene is exactly it from Cliffhanger, where I'm this woman here, and Stallone is my place in the industry, and it's trying to hold on to me, and I'm slipping. And it's because I wasn't in a studio. I'd just come from a studio of, a team of 40 people. We'd shipped a Scooby-Doo game for Warner Brothers, and I felt my creative outlet was gone. I could write, I could, fool around on the computer, but I really wasn't making games or had a creative output to the scale that I did have. And I felt it. So I went to GDC and I was looking around. I was looking for jobs. I went up for some pretty crazy jobs. I was going for the narrative designer on Splinter Cell that's about to come out, Blacklist, missed out on that one. And then also Telltale, lead designer at Telltale, designer at Blizzard, a whole heap of different things. And I went through the whole ring of the HR circus over there. And when I left, I was quite jaded. With how that all happened, big HR firewalls, and I felt impotent as a creative. But it was crazy because there were these amazing things happening in the industry. Everything was shifting. There were more indie games than ever. And I kept asking myself these questions, like these things. Can you remain independent and own everything, so your entire game not have to sell out? Make your dream game, so not something that's just, I'll just make an endless runner because that's what I can afford. Like, no, your dream game, what you want to make. To the scale that you want, so not confined by the boundaries of the usual indie market and what an indie developer can do. And then actually do something that's world-class quality level. So, again, not just something, hey, look, I slapped this together and, it looks like it came out the other end of a game jam. Something that you can put on the market and literally put it up against AAA studios with 40 people there, and it garners the same sort of respect and awe. And then, of course, the other one, having come from Taurus, and not like Taurus is anything different, but just an established studio, helping to shape that studio and helping to cultivate their games and everything that you have creatively, your pitches, your ideas, your growth going into these titles and that company and the clients of that company, and not seeing any of the profit. And then when I went to apply for jobs, I saw that that would continue. Even if I ended up being creative director at Ubisoft, I still wouldn't be seeing, you know, a share of the profit relative to my input. But there was one thing, I didn't have any money. I just blown it all going to GDC. And apparently, if you're a developer and you want to kick off a studio, or you want to make your game, or you want to do all those things that I had on that list before, the universe just looks at you and says, so it's like, that's basically all it kept saying to me all the time. I was just hitting a brick wall, everything I wanted to do, but I could see pieces coming together. I could see things happening. And one thing I did think, and one thing that I knew, is that I didn't have money, so I didn't actually have money in the bank, dollars and cents. But I had capital, which can sometimes perform the same function that money can perform, but it doesn't actually have to be money, as it states. It's just assets available for use in the production of further assets. I'm an asset, my talent is an asset, what I can produce without money is an asset, and the people that I knew, my connections, were assets, and all of these things could be put together to create something, further assets. So I had the beginnings of a team. Those producers that I was talking to earlier from Hong Kong, they wanted a game, a Christmas sort of game, like an online flash portal. And so I was working away at that, and I had to gather a team, and it was going to be a big project. It was about 4 million euros that was going to be handed over. I was talking to the VCs and everything. It was a done deal, but of course everyone told me it was too good to be true, and I was like, no, it's actually true. And of course it was too good to be true in the end. But it was a big game, like I said, 4 million euro online multiplayer thing. So I'd got some leads, people I'd worked with before, some really talented people from around the industry. And so I had the beginnings of a team. And all the while this was happening, so I was saying that development was really kicking off. So you can see here the year that I was in GDC, and this has been happening every year since, the IGF has been having a record number of entries, submissions, people trying to get into the International Independent Games Festival. You can see this year they had just under 400 entries from different studios, and it says here many of them new titles from leading indie developers across all platforms. So new IP as well, and from new developers too. So this whole shift was happening, and I was thinking, how is that possible? What's happening? What's creating this? As the side of the industry that I'd come from was absolutely dying, and all of the Australian industry were just closing down. They couldn't shift. They had these big ships that were just on this production rail of we make games that come out the other end of a contract from a publisher in the US, and they didn't have these ships, but everyone else were in these little dinghies, and they could just, as soon as the waves came, they could just navigate around them. And it wasn't like this big tidal wave that the ships could turn around and just face their bow towards it and weather it. The waves were coming in constantly, things happening with the GFC, the rise of digital mobile devices, the indie culture boom that Dave was talking about just before. And so what I thought was, what if I could take all of those things, all of these enablers that are enabling these other people, these developers that haven't been into the industry yet, a lot of them, and just, oh, hey, I want to make games, and instead of waiting there for someone to give them a job, they just start making them. Well, what if I was like, well, can you come from the industry and do that yourself as well? What if we got a bunch of talented professional people together and we decided to make games? How could we do it? So we created League of Geeks. And it started off with two of the team members that I was talking about, myself, and we quickly brought on a fourth person. And this is how it was going to work. We would keep our day jobs, and we would work out of hours. League of Geeks would be completely in kind for us, and we would just start making a game. We'd start throwing ideas together. All the while, we were working. I'm creative director at a studio called Divisive Media, which you can see is my day job. Ty Kerry, one of the other directors, is my art director at Divisive Media. And then we have Blake Mitzi, who was a lead designer in the games industry, but now builds power plants and runs $100 million projects, which is pretty crazy and insane. When he tells us about what an acid pipe can do when it blows up on a site, we're all like, oh, it's an amazing job. And then Jacek Tuszewski, another director, was an audio director at Taurus Games. And then John Sietsma, the other director, he came on a bit later. He was a lead engineer at some of the biggest studios like Transmission and Big Ant in Australia. And we're going to work on and off. And soon enough, something came out of that. We sat down in a cafe and we're like, what are we going to do? We want to make a game. What's that game going to be? And we were sitting in this cafe and we all had iPads and we were just talking as we do about how much we're loving tablet gaming. And we said, what if we could come back, and I think we were talking about, we used to role play a little bit, like pen and paper stuff. Like, what if we could have this game where you could come together in a cafe? So when we're done, we could come back to this cafe, the 5 of us, and play this game on our iPads and have this incredible adventure where, where we laugh, we cry, we hate each other, and this epic fantasy adventure. And of course, we were sold, and it was going to be a 6-week mobile game that we're going to do, and a year later, here we are. And so that's how Armello was born. And so we set off with the goal to make this game. We spent 8 months out of hours prototyping it on paper. This is a prototype of the game. You can see all the peripheral things around the board. That's everything the iPad does behind the scenes. So you've got your character sheets here and everything. It would take us about 3 hours to get through this game in a play session, 4 people. But on the iPad, we imagine it will take about 20 minutes to 30 minutes per game online multiplayer, 4 people. So we're designing this thing from the ground up, 4 tablets, but we prototyped it all out on paper beforehand. Then some questions started coming up, and we brought on John Sietsma, who is our coding guru and our all-round technical guy, and also an amazing designer as well. And he came onto the project. So once we got it all happening, we needed people. We needed more people, not Mexicans, but just other people, other team members, because we had a big game to make. And so we created this model, basically. And we were able to get amazing talent. We didn't want just, like I said, the whole idea is to make world-class games. So we needed world-class people. So we actually went out of industries. This is a piece by Adam Duncan, which is actually a still from our trailer that we released. Adam Duncan owns his own animation studio, has been in the industry longer than, well, I was probably in school when he got his first job. This is from Simon Boxer, an amazing concept artist that came on board, absolutely smashing it, is in San Francisco at the moment, freelancing to some major studios. But then we have people from the AAA space. And we have people from films, working on some amazing films. And then we have people from the VFX industry as well, the VFX and animation industries. So it came down to 2 things. How did we get all these people? Really, it was passion and process. So the game, everything came from this passion. When you say to someone, oh, we work on games during the day, but then we're working on this other game, when you're already working on a game, the fact that you're working on a second one says that you're probably pretty passionate about it. And then the other part is process. So I was at the Molly-Do Game Jam, when was it? Earlier in the year, I believe. And we walked in there, and I think we were our team were the only developers there that actually worked in a commercial game studio. And, everyone else just awesome indie crew, smashing out games. But we had this process, and and people were looking at our board, and we had this whiteboard, and it was like, Saturday we're going to nail this, Sunday we're going to nail this, and we were probably far too pedantic about it. But we wanted to execute a finished, polished game, and we did. And so it was sort of about applying that process and that experience that we gained from a commercial studio and having to have that on bigger titles and bigger scope, but then still having the passion of an indie. So between the directors, we've shipped over 50 titles, and we have 60 years experience under our belts. So this was a big calling card for other people. We needed a strong leadership. We were going to front all the cash. So when you come on to League of Geeks, you don't have to pay anything. If you're a contractor, we might have to pay $20,000 worth in licensing fees for something. You don't suffer any of that. The directors pay for that. That comes out of my personal savings. But because we're leveraging all the latest in technology and the online community and software and everything, that money isn't actually that much. We can do it on the cheap. Then, of course, we needed to get the law stuff in place. So we went to Trescox and we spared no expense. Something that you hear a lot of the time is indie studios or studios developing, even larger scale studios, dodging the bullet with the costs for legals and trying to get around things. But we just dove headfirst into it, And we spent the 8 months that we were prototyping. In parallel, we were working with Trescox in Sydney, figuring out all the legalities. And so it's basically, hey, work on my awesome, soon-to-be successful mega game. You know, and you've sort of got this thing, trust me, it's cool. How many people are floating around Melbourne right now, let alone the world, saying, hey, work on my game. It's going to be really successful. It's going to be super cool. And so we knew we had to back that up. So we got contracts drawn up and all the legalities of a points system put in place. So the point system works like this. When the revenue stream comes in, we have a distributor or investor cut that comes out first. So that's Apple. Or, you know, if we published on Android, Android's cut. It could even be, say, for example, if we partnered with Microsoft to take it to XBLA, then Microsoft's cut would come out there. Expenses. So obviously the costs of development, we can recoup those. And then after that is our profit. The profit is broken up like this. 5% goes back to League of Geeks for petty cash, because the directors are actually paying for League of Geeks to stay running, so we don't need a huge kitty of money. 45% goes to the directors, 9% each for obviously their financial risk, creatively managing the project, running the production, being the key creatives. And then 50% is what we call the pool. And the pool is where everyone's points are attributed to. So a task is assigned points. So we go through, we schedule out the whole game, all the tasks as far ahead as we can, and we assign them points. And they get a points value that's equivalent to what a seasoned professional would take to do that task. So it's not how long would it take you if you didn't know this to, you know, bash around and get it right. It's like if you could do this job and you did it every day, how long would it take you? Then that gets points. So a piece of card art, maybe 6 points. So then one of the contractors, say for example Ty, if we're talking card out, one of the directors goes to a contractor and says, hey, we've got this card art task, it's 6 points. Do you have 6 hours next week that you could, what's your availability like? And contractor A might say, look, I'm really busy next week, my job, we're crunching, I can't do anything. It's like, cool. We go to the next person, hey, do you have 6 hours? Yeah, I do. All right, we're going to assign you this task. So the director then assigns them that task, the contractor finishes that task, and if they finish it to the quality and everything that we desire, we approve it, and then the contractor receives that value in points. If there's 1,000 points total in tasks, and a contractor has done 10 tasks at 10 points, pretty simple math, they get 100 points, which equals 10% of the profit share of the project. That's how it works. And the funny thing is that once we'd locked all this down and we were like, all right, breathe in, we've got to take this out to people, people started saying yes. When Adam Duncan, that I was talking about before, that owned his own animation studio, one of Australia's best illustrators, dare I say it, he just said yes. He obviously thought about it and stuff, but he was just like, yeah, okay. But it's not always easy. You know, managing this thing out of hours, this happens almost every week, every second week. Sometimes we realize very quickly that if we didn't talk to each other, if we didn't communicate, if we missed 2 meetings in a row, then we would have, the next meeting we wouldn't even be productive because it'd be this huge D&M about, oh, what's happening with the project? No, is it slipping? But we managed to keep it on track. Sometimes things get a bit intense. This is one of my favorite emails that went around. You know, we're all working on this out of hours. We're stupidly stressed. But it's coming together. We've got a game. We announced, we had 50,000 views on YouTube for our announced trailer. And we announced during the week of Tokyo Game Show when the new PS3 was announced. We have no gameplay to show. We have no titles to our name. We're an unknown indie developer, and we got 50,000 views on YouTube. We were picked up by Kotaku, IGN, The Verge, Pocket Gamer, Board Game Geek, and the future is looking bright. Now, the biggest thing with this is that we want to market it out. So we want to be able to, at the end when we've wrapped it up, right now I wouldn't dare give this model to anyone because as you can see it crumbles every second week and we rebuild it, we find better ways to work. But at the end when we've come at it and we've got a game, if we're happy with it, we're actually going to package it up and we're going to provide guidelines and some advice and everything and let people know and put it out to the indie community so that people can use this and hopefully create a way that, you know, whether it's just a high quality demo that you want to get out and put in front of publishers, or it's an actual game, doesn't need to be the scope that you could do it with 2 people or 3 people, or you could actually scale this up to 60 people, then hopefully we can enable some creatives to make their dream games without needing all that money up front and sticking to the usual whims of the industry. So that's League of Geeks in a nutshell.
Thanks. Really impressive. I've never seen that kind of system before. I have one question that will come from me.
Yep.
For change. I'm thinking just logically, you have an absolute number of points, let's say 100.
Yep.
This makes it easier. Now, we know video game development.
Yep.
There's always added jobs.
Yep.
It certainly never ends unless you say feature freeze. So, unless you've mapped this out very thoroughly,
yep.
I would say that probably, you know where I'm headed for, right?
There will be feature creep,
and
1,000 points becomes
1,000
10,000.
10,000. How do you handle that?
Certainly. So when we scheduled out the entire project, it was actually 5 of us sitting around a table on our laptops, all in the same Google spreadsheet. That was interesting. We broke it all down, and we came up with a cap. So we had about 6,000 points worth of tasks, and then we allowed some contingency for iteration. So we said we've got a soft cap on points of 7,000. When someone comes onto the project, we explain that to them, and it's like, look, there are 800 points worth of art tasks that you could be eligible for with your skill set. So, if you have the time, you could take 500 of those and 500% out of, 500 out of 7,000, figure out the percentage. But what we do is, because there is natural, like you say, there is natural creep, so it is a soft cap. However, the beauty of the point system is that it is relative. So if someone comes on and does 50 points worth of work, and then we realize that we need like 1,000 more points worth of work, if they're not the ones contributing to that, then obviously their overall contribution to the project starts being diminished by other people contributing to the project. So it has this really nice pulley system to it, where it's like when someone pulls on one end, the other person sort of let down a little bit. And that helps with, once we launch and we do updates, if you've only helped us up to launch, you still have your share. Your share is ongoing for the lifetime of the product, but as more people add to it, then that person's share might diminish.
Wonderful. I'd like to see this further develop. I think it's super. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, mate. Michael Wirtz, who's done developing games with his agency, all kinds of films, scripts, doctoring, all kinds of things, really all around talent. Really happy to have you. And he's on a quest. You're both on a quest.